Hi, this is Jeremy Toback, and you're listening to the Nothing's Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dogbowl Studio is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on X at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Jeremy Toback. In the 90s was in the band Brad, but right now he's got Renee and Jeremy.
Yeah, promoting some new singles. One Conjuring, the other one Truth Falls, and he's got another one coming up, right?
Yeah, under his solo work, he's got a song coming out called The Other, and he's got a couple other songs should be releasing as a single and maybe even a full length. We're ready to check it out.
Yeah, well, he was a really fun interview, so let's get to it, man.
All right, good night.
Good night. Jeremy, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Jeremy, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, Jeff. Good to meet you. Good to speak to you both.
Yeah, man, we're excited to have you. So thanks for the rescheduling. We're so excited to have you tonight. Let's get right into this. So recently you've been busy releasing the new singles, Conjuring and Truth Falls. Yeah. Tell our listeners a little bit more about the creativity and writing behind these tracks.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of, I had a long hiatus where I wasn't really doing music at all. And, at a certain point, songs started showing up, and really during the pandemic, a couple things happened. One thing that had been happening is that Renee and Jeremy, which we'll get to, my indie folk duo, had kind of blown up in streaming. And so that was opening sort of a new avenue for me into like, oh, there's an audience out there for my music, which was novel. Then just a lot of things happened during the pandemic. I split with my ex, it's an amicable split, but we've been together for a long time, and there was like a flurry of new romances, and I'd fallen in love with music, but previously again, all these things sort of collided, and I just started finishing songs, which I hadn't. I had like all these things show up, and I'd just be like, I'll finish that one day. And I started finishing songs, and Conjuring was the first one where it just felt like this felt like a real song to me. And it felt kind of like, okay, this is connected to what I was doing at the height of my solo stuff a gazillion years ago, but it's new. And of course it had to be like 6.5 minutes long because I had a lot to say about in those intervening years.
Exactly.
I was like, it's going to have to be epic. And so fortunate enough to I do have this relationship with the guys over at New Monkey Studio, which is Elliott Smith's old studio in Van Nuys, this guy Joel Graves and Greg Killa Cortez is his artist name, who are my co-producers. Robert Capadona is the co-owner over there. And so it's kind of, I have creative leeway and a partnership to just work there. And we just started going to work on this song. And that was the beginning. And then Renee and Jeremy intervened because it was the pandemic and everybody had time. And suddenly it was like, oh, let's make a new Renee and Jeremy record. So I took 6 months to do that. And so we made our first record in 10 years. And then I returned to Conjuring and finished it up with those guys. And Greg plays on it, Killa Cortez plays on it, and Joel plays on it. And I kind of play everything else. It's a song about there's this idea that some people have talked about a morphogenetic field, that when any combination of human beings get together, it could be a couple, it could be a band, it could just be two friends, right? And they create a third personality, like a specific energy between them that's greater than the sum of their parts. It could be a gnarly one. It doesn't have to be positive, but like in the best sense, there's like a multiplicative power to those partnerships, which is why we love certain bands with certain constellations of people. Like, and so this came out of like a romance, but that's what the song is about. It's about conjuring a case for the space only you and I can make. This idea that there's something incredibly special about the energy that we create when we're with other people, specific people, and honoring that.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
How's that? Yeah, that was like 10 years worth of an answer.
That's like this is brilliant.
Well, I bought Perfect Flux Thing when it came out in 1997. Can you talk a little bit about how your songwriting has changed since then?
Wait, which one is that? Is that Eric or Jeff who bought it?
Oh, this is Jeff. Yeah.
Jeff, okay. Yeah, I don't recognize your voices yet, but that's first of all, you're the guy who bought it. Thank you.
I bought all three of them. I got the EP and Another True Fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I found out like subsequently. I'm like, wow, like a lot of those sales from my college classmates, and you. It's interesting. It's like there's definitely some connections. I think still a sense of poetry and wordplay, I think, in the music, and definitely in those days and throughout my solo records. I mean, like the one after Another True Fiction was a little bit more homogenized in some ways, but the mysticism and the spiritual concerns that I've always been playing with and that are a deep sort of part of me and my artistic expression, those continue, as you can tell already by my explanation of what Conjuring is about. So those things continue. I just think I'm a little more direct and a little kinder in terms of welcoming the listener in, like maintaining some mystery. But like if Perfect Flux Thing, some of those songs are pretty, like they're dense, the lyrics, like it's like good luck. Never mind like Down from Brad, like good luck deciphering those words. I know what it's about, but
Oh, very good.
That's a long way of saying there's some connection, but I think there is an evolution.
Well, you brought up the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have spoke to so many artists during the pandemic, and then post COVID-19, and
right.
A lot of artists had mixed emotions of what COVID did for them as far as creativity and writing new music and recording and et cetera, et cetera. But for
right.
you, what did the pandemic do for you as far as, I guess, creative songwriting and getting into the studio and recording new music? Do you feel like as though it was like a renaissance for you, or do you feel like it was just kind of like, hey, it's status quo? I just feel like getting back in the studio and writing music and recording and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say it was status quo. I would say, and, listen, that was a time of a lot of hardship for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and we don't need to get in, for so many reasons, right? So I don't want to make light of that at all. I think the irony is that for certain people, and I'm one of them, it was also like, it was like an incredibly powerful time. And there were hardships, but it was, you know, I have another job that I do for money. I'm freelance, but like it takes up my time. And suddenly, like, you know, I write, I'm a ghostwriter for commercial directors, not music. I help them get their jobs. I write treatments for them. You know, there weren't commercials being made, so I had time. And, you know, when Renee and Rich Jacques, who is the Renee and Jeremy producer, called me and were like, let's make another Renee and Jeremy record, which I'd said like no to like every year for like the past 10 years. I you know, and I was like, band's not broken up. I'm just like trying to hold my marriage together and work. You know, like, you know, like we're not broken up, Renee. You know, like I want to make a record, but I'd put it off successfully. I had no excuses. I was like, oh. And Rich was staying in Renee's guest house in Santa Barbara. He was like, come up here once a week. It's super chill. Let's make a record. Like we're like here, we're isolated. It's all good. It was really, so it was like that kind of thing. It was an opening that wouldn't have existed, definitely for me. So that's one piece, was there was time, and that everybody had kind of time. That was, you know, the other thing. And also just a lot of the issues that were coming up. I mean, I'm very much a writer who responds to things that are deeply personal and also deeply universal. That's like my sort of attempt game. And there was just a lot of stuff to think about and to write about and to try to resolve through, you know, the poetry of song. So, you know, it's like you don't ask for hard times, but like if you find yourself in them as an artist, you respond. So
fair enough.
Yeah. I want to get back to Renee and Jeremy in a minute, but back to your solo work. We recently interviewed Ivan Julian, and I know he was very complimentary of working with you back in the day. He wanted to know how you were doing.
I love that. You know, the funny thing is, like, I'm like doing like a certain kind of round of podcasts. I don't do a ton of them, but I do what, you know, pretty much whoever asks who seems cool. And like Ivan and I have like, we haven't spoken, but we've encountered each other on the same podcast a couple times, which I love. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, God, what a sweet man and amazing musician. And yeah, that was, I don't know if there was more of a question, but like, I love that guy.
More of a reminiscence. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That was obviously the Perfect Flux Thing band. It was Ivan on guitar and Melvin Gibbs, who was in the Rollins band, on bass, and Dougie Bound, who played with Chris Whitley and numerous other people. I think, you know, Ivan played with Richard Hell and the Voidoids. Yeah. There's some other New York. I mean, that band was sick, needless to say. So.
Well, I want to bring this back to your music. You also have another new single that's going to be released here in November. What can you tell your fans, or what can your fans expect from you from this anticipated single?
Yeah, so this song is called "The Other," and it's a song that I actually really wanted to. It was done and pretty much ready to go a year ago, and I'd sort of run into a wall. Like, while Renee and Jeremy was doing really well, I really didn't know how to promote my solo stuff effectively without a label, and just it was frustrating because I put out Conjuring and Truth Falls, and I really love those songs, and they'd reached certain people, but I just was like, I'm not reaching people, and I don't really have a means. So I just kind of shelved it for a minute, and this will sound really strange given who I am in so many other ways, but I started, like in June, I started doing this TikTok thing. Because I knew certain people who are respected who were doing it, and it was really empowering to them, and they were finding an audience, and it became more of like a practice than just a promotional thing, and it's led to all sorts of stuff. Led to me telling these stories about Brad from back in the day on Instagram and on TikTok, which I didn't go in intending to do. It just evolved. It evolved out of me like speaking about Ho'oponopono and radical forgiveness. Ho'oponopono is this. I'm getting to the song. I can't tell a story quickly. I'm sorry. Ho'oponopono is this Hawaiian practice of forgiveness, and that led me into a story about Shawn Smith, the singer of Brad, and how we sort of mended our differences. That led to me talking about Brad, and the song The Other, which had been sitting there for a while, is a song that is inspired by my practice of forgiveness and inspired by all the radical divisions I see in our culture, which have been intensifying. I mean, I don't think that's a pretty a shocking statement, right? Have been intensifying. Yeah. We're intensifying during COVID for sure, where I found myself on strange sides of things, like trying not to be on any sides, quite frankly. And so that is in that song, and in combination with doing this thing on TikTok, where it's like, oh, I now have a means to express, to make content around that song that's creative and cool to me, that the algorithm can go then do its little magic and find whoever in the globe is interested in it. So, yeah, I think I'm gonna put this thing out. Basically, is what happened. And so that's the song, and it's called The Other. And it's also just a sort of post-REM art rock jangle meets the national Radiohead kind of jam that happens to be about this thematic thing going on in it. So,
very, very cool.
There you go.
Absolutely.
I think you'll dig it. If you like Perfect Flux thing, I think you'll dig it.
I can't wait. I can't wait to hear it. You alluded to Brad and Shawn Smith and Stone Gossard and Regan Hagar, and that's where I first learned about Jeremy Toback. And, back in 1992, and the first time I heard that album just blew me away, and I've been promoting anything Shawn Smith since.
With good reason.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit? I mean, what the one thing I don't know is, like, where did Jeremy Toback come from before Brad? How did you get?
Oh, cool. Yeah. I was in LA, and I was kind of just not trying. There was a period where I had tried to sort of make it as a conventional mainstream musician and bass player specifically. Like, I had like a 2-hour audition with Lenny Kravitz, with Joey Peters, who was the drummer for Brantley Buffalo later, and neither of us got the gig. There was this period where I was intensely trying to make it, and I was in bands and trying to make. And I just was like, I had stopped doing that, and I was only writing really obscure art songs. I was trying to reinvent the song structure in a little tenement palace above a motorcycle shop in Silver Lake. And like completely disconnected from what was happening at the time, which was like Nirvana and this band called Pearl Jam. And except that I actually had a dear friend, my best friend growing up, this guy Alex Rosenast, who was best friends with this guy named Stone Gossard, who happened to be the guitar player in Pearl Jam. And I'd gone up to visit Alex in Seattle a couple times, and on one trip I finally met Stone, and it was like a little funny story where we were like sitting at a coffee shop, and I somehow ended up at the same table with him. I don't even know. It was Regan and his mom's coffee shop. Regan, the drummer from Brad. And I was like, that must be Stone. I must have seen a picture of him or something. He didn't know who I was because there was no pictures of me in Rolling Stone or whatever the fuck. But after, and he's kind of holding court, and it's a funny time because it's like, it's Gold Rush Seattle, Grunge Rush Seattle, and his friends are still pulling lattes, and he's one of the biggest rock stars in the world. It's like that moment, and everybody's like, that's our buddy, but there's also kind of this energy around it. And at a certain point, he's like, hey, who's this guy? Pointing to me. And I'm like, I'm Jeremy. And he's like, oh, Jeremy, wow. And like, he realized who I was. I obviously knew who he was. And from that point, we kind of just hit it off. Social stuff, whatever, barbecues. We talked about drummers. I remember us talking about drummers for some reason and having like the kind of conversation only nerdy musicians can have about like where the bass drum should sit relative to the beat. Always a little behind, right? was the idea. And that was it. And I went home to continue. I was teaching speed reading at the time in LA. And like a couple weeks later, I get a call from Stone, and he's out of the blue in my room. It's like, hey, that dude from Pearl Jam's on the phone. I'm like, ah, Stone, cool. And he's like, Jeremy, what's up? You know, Regan and Shawn and I are thinking about jamming in October for a couple weeks and maybe making a record, and we were wondering if you wanted to play bass. And I was like, I haven't played bass in like a year. I'm just sitting here at the piano writing weird songs. But he's like, oh, some time off from your instrument can be cool. I was like, all right. I'll start practicing, man. Let's do it. That's like literally how I got invited to do Brad. And those guys later were like, it worked out incredibly. And later they were like, we don't even know why the fuck we asked you. I mean, Alex was my best friend who owned Rock Candy, who was best friends with Stone. They're like, Alex recommended you. His last name is Rosenass. They're like, what the fuck does Rosenass know about music? But they were it was like a gut call, a total instinct call on Stone's part. And it was kind of like that, I think, for him at that moment. I mean, he had some pretty good calls, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, they're like, oh, Eddie Vedder, that guy might work. You know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you've been a chameleon of sorts in your musical endeavors throughout your career. I guess, you know, in this part of your career, how do you view yourself as an artist? You've done the rock stuff, you've done the alt stuff, you've done the folky stuff. I guess, where's your niche now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing because it's like there are real connections between what Renee and Jeremy does and my solo music, particularly now. Like, they've influenced each other. Renee and Jeremy's really sort of inspired me to like have like a softer side, which was always there, but just like it's changed the way I sing. You know, for me, like these things used to feel very separate, like they were very, like they didn't belong together or somehow. It was a weird schism in my brain. Like I was like, oh, Renee and Jeremy's not even my own music. Like I felt like that way for a long time, which was stupid. But at this point, to me, they feel like different expressions of kind of the same theme that I'm always working on, you know. So Renee and Jeremy does it through this sort of very indie folk and sweet way, where my solo stuff and there's this obvious balance of the masculine and feminine because that's what's there, right? There's two singers. Whereas like I view my solo stuff as more like a little bit more explicitly shadow work. Like it's music, it's indie rock or art rock or some category that I can't seem to find to call it. But that is sort of an excuse to really create mantras, really, to be honest. Like the songs are meant to be transformative, like they're meant to have like a sort of map-like quality to consciousness, which sounds really pretentious as shit, but like that's, I mean, just what I'm trying to do. And so like those things are connected. Like Renee and Jeremy is trying to uplift and soothe people. That's what we're doing. We're doing it through song, and I think people legitimately get it. So on the surface, I think that there's some real stylistic differences, but what's going on underneath is a through line. Like, I even have like a yoga music label at one point. I wasn't an artist on it, but you know, that music was obviously specifically trying to be spiritual music. So I hope that makes some sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But back to Brad. So, you know, the Shame album was on Epic Records. Can you talk, I think when I was looking at my notes, it was recorded back in October of '92, so looking at 32 years ago. When you reflect back on that early time with Brad, do you have any stories from in the studio for Shame?
Oh my God! Like there's a million. I don't want to bore your ass, but it's like,
Never.
I mean, the record was made with it was made on, Stone just kind of fronted it. Like there was no label involved in making the record. I think he just wanted to do whatever he wanted to do and keep the pressure low, which he succeeded at. And we made that record and wrote it incredibly quickly. It was under 3 weeks, and just very much a free spirit. Like there's a few times I've been sort of fortunate, I think to really make great art. Or, I don't want to be pretentious and say that record's great, but I think that record is something people think that it's special. I kind of think it is, even within stuff that I've made. But to make art that's good, let's just say, or whatever, you need to have a sense of freedom and possibility to allow, to me, I feel very comfortable saying the muse or muses, to allow something beyond you to contribute to it. And that includes and the people in the room, first of all, so everybody in the band, but something beyond the people in the band, right? And I feel like that kind of spirit, that was the first time in my life where I was with a group of guys, it could have been women, in this case guys or whatever, musicians who not only had sort of the ability and the training and the creativity and everything that you need to have a level of mastery, to really do something dope, but we also were put into a situation where we could do it, and it just clicked. And it's really hard stuff to do, as it turns out. It's those situations are amazing when you carve them for yourselves, and there's all kinds of things that artists and producers have done to try and do that within the context of being on major labels and stuff like that. But we were lucky that Stone really sort of helped create that space, and we were all available for it. And there was some weed smoking that didn't hurt.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the first two albums? You had got a little bit of creative reign to sing a song on each one. Down, you talked about earlier, and then on the Interiors album, Circle and Line. Can you talk a little bit about that experience to be able to contribute your songs to the band?
Yeah, I'll try and be a little bit more down to earth. For instance, with Shame, I didn't even know what we were doing. And I didn't really know what my role was. I figured I was just going to be a bass player, and I did come in with some bass ideas, and I had been tooling around with this idea for a song called Down, but I thought oh, maybe there's some outside possibility, but I was certainly not planning on hey, I'm going to go sing a song on this record. But it was just so creative. The spirit was so open and creative that it was oh, okay, so yeah, I'm playing bass on their ideas, but then I would throw down one of my ideas, and it would become, Raise Love was from a bass line that I brought in, or 20th Century is from just the slapping idea that I had. Obviously it's so much more than that, it's what everybody brought to it, but that spirit was there, and at a certain point I must have felt, oh, I guess maybe it's cool for me to just sit down at Shawn's keyboard while everybody's, smoking or whatever, and start playing this thing. And I just did it. It just felt natural. And then people were into it enough for us to try and record it. So that's how that occurred in that record. I would say that Interiors is a very different experience. But if we can I can talk about that too. It's just it's not the same.
Yeah.
Shame was this very free jam, collaborative. Nobody had any expectations, I don't think. And I think that's what makes it such a special record. Certainly for me personally, and I think for certain people. Interiors is like all this stuff went down, and in between Shame and that, and it was a very self-conscious record. Like, it was much more about people bringing songs in and then us arranging the songs. And I had written Circle in Line at the end of Perfect Flux thing, but there was like just no place for it on that record. It was sort of the end of the first sessions with Craig Street, and then the sessions that happened after that were about attempts to have some sort of a single, which Circle Line probably would have actually been a dope single. I don't think it would have been as cool because, you know, the reason it sounds the way it sounds is because Brad did it. That, you know, it was Stone playing bass and Shawn singing harmony and Regan playing drums. It makes it what it is. So, but that song is a song that I came in with complete and just presented, and we did it, which is all cool. It's just that, you know, there are really cool songs on that record. It just wasn't the same kind of free experience. It was much more like, we're going to make a proper record. Satchel had put 2 records out. They were really great records. They hadn't done amazingly commercially. I didn't have the same pressure on myself. I didn't yet know that Perfect Fluxing was going to sell no copies, relatively speaking. but there was a lot of ambition in it, in Interiors. Okay, we got to make something. Now that, there's so much, that whole period is so layered. I mean, like, the first record, Shame, had been kind of killed by management and Epic. And so it's like, in the wake of that, when we had the mojo, when we had the magical record, when everything out of Seattle was selling millions of copies and we didn't really get our chance, now it was like, okay, now we have the green light, so let's make a record that can happen. And we made a cool record, but it wasn't a record that really, you know, the time had passed. And whatever was happening at that moment, I guess that's like 97, right?
Yep.
We're already deep in the, like, I don't want to slag on other bands, but I don't know what to call that stuff that was on the radio.
Yeah.
We're deep into the, like, pop version of alt rock, right?
Right,
Let's just say
exactly.
That. Yeah. You know, we're deep into, like, bands that have, we got guitars, and, like, you know, where all the records are being mixed by, you know, the same people, you know, and the same snare sound. It's just like it very quickly went from, wow, anything's possible, to like, this is the worst shit ever, in my opinion.
Because it was all cookie cutter.
Yeah.
At that point.
It was so cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And like, RCA was like trying to make a cookie cutter with me, which was hilarious. Such not a cookie cutter artist, but they almost got there on the second RCA record.
Well, one of my favorite concert, what do you call that, adventures that I put myself in was when in 1997 I had been home for college for a couple of years. I decided I wanted to see Brad live, so I drove 3 hours up to Chicago by myself. Went to dinner, went to the show, and then drove back home when it got over.
Oh my God!
I think I got home at like 2, 3 in the morning. I can't remember, but it was just a night I'll never forget. But can you talk a little bit about Brad and the live shows?
So yeah, sadly, that was 97 when you saw Brad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sadly, like, I wasn't on that tour, because just like, it's like there's a story for everything, and just basically those, like, obviously they wanted me to be on the tour, and I wanted to enough, but I was like promoting my record, and I was like, hey, I've got a band together. I just come off of Lollapalooza, the second stage of Lollapalooza, and I was like, can I open for Brad, do you think, with my band? And they were like, maybe if you did like some acoustic songs and then played with us, that would be cool. It feels weird if the band. Anyways, I had a whole thing about reaction to that. I was like, why won't they let me have my band? Like, this is fucked up. And in retrospect, I totally see their point, but I threw a hissy fit. I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to do it, which was stupid. So I wasn't on that tour, sadly, because it would have been a very cool tour to be a part of, and it was a bad call on my part. So yeah, that's the story of that. I didn't do it. By the time I went on tour with Brad, it was like 2003 for Welcome Discovery Park.
Okay.
Which was not a fun tour. There's probably some good shows in there, but Shawn and I weren't getting along. It was just I didn't really like that record. It was just like not. There were great things about it, which I really appreciate now, like the fact that like we would show up and there would be fans like everywhere we played is just such an amazing thing. But that's something I appreciate in retrospect. I just didn't have a good time doing it, sadly.
Well, we don't have to dwell on that too much.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, but it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. I'm glad that you saw the band, and I hope it was killing. I'm sure Shawn sang great, and Mike Berg was playing bass, and he's a great guy and great musician. So
I wanted to change gears on you here and talk a little bit more about Renee and Jeremy. You know, it's a project that's been around since 2006, correct? Am I right on that?
Yeah, we've been together longer than Led Zeppelin was together.
But, you know, for our listeners that are unfamiliar with this project, can you talk a little bit more about the origins and more about what you and Renee do together?
Yeah, I mean, that project has evolved. It began literally as Renee. I was, at the end of it was a long end of my first run to the music business. And I was just like, I didn't really have anything going on. I was doing that yoga music label at the time. Like, that's what I was doing. And Renee reached out to me and said, hey, I'm pregnant. I'm making a lullaby record. Do you have a song you'd like to contribute? And I was like, oh, that's super cool. I actually wrote the song for my son, Miles, when he was born. It's called Welcome to This World. I'd love for you to do it, And I went up, and Miles is now 23, by the way, which is just a trip. And so I went to Renee's, and at the time, I would go, there was a yoga center in LA that I would go to pregnancy yoga class there because my wife had gone to, and I'd play the song and all the pregnant women would cry. Like it was like a thing. But I never recorded it. Anyway, I went and played it for Renee, and she started singing, and her husband Paul was sitting there. I know Paul since we were kids. I know Renee from sort of Los Angeles singer-songwriter circles. We'd met in the dressing room of the Mint in LA. Mm-hmm. She had a sandwich, and I would just finishing sound check, and she had this cool sandwich, and I was like, hey, that looks good. And that's when I met Renee. But anyway, so I play the song, she starts singing, and Paul, her husband, is just like, you guys have to make this record. And I was like, what? It's like, yeah, you guys have to make this record. And I was like, cool. I for whatever reason, I was just like, yeah, okay, I'll do this. And we made it. Interestingly, I was definitely inspired by the Brad record by Shame, just in terms of how it was super off the cuff. We wrote it super quickly, just like Shame. We recorded it very quickly, in a couple of weeks. And in some ways, even though it wasn't a rock record, things like Buttercup were Buttercup is a take on Shame. That's one take. Shawn's vocal is live when we recorded it in the studio. It's just a take. There's no overdubs. So for It's a Big World, that Renee and Jeremy record, we recorded all of it in this room that became her first child, Amelia's nursery. And most of it's just us singing in the room. And that record, it was got a very mixed reception. We were very consciously trying to make something that was influenced by Nick Drake and Elliott Smith. We just were like, what if we did this super cool, low key folk record? This is before indie folk existed as a genre, right? Only the lyrics are for kids, and families. And so when it came out, people in the children's music space, some people loved it, and other people were like, this is like dark and depressing. This is not kids' music. Yeah, we got like shit for it. Like, I was like, it's beautiful. What's your problem? You know?
Oh, the harmonies are great.
And so it got like enough going on. Like, there were people who loved it, but there were people who didn't. And that's where it started. And like then we made a second record, which was like, I was like, oh, let's make something upbeat so that we're more like children's music. And there's some cool things on that record, but it's not nearly as good. Like, it's not really us, what we do. And then the third record, before we stopped for a while, was like, I was starting this other career, and it was really like kind of done quickly because I was starting this ghostwriting career, and that was all covers. We didn't even write anything. Right. Our kids were older, but it was like, okay, we're still going to make for this market. Like, it'll be like a little crossover-y for adults. We had a cover on the first record of Three Little Birds, which there were things on that record that was like, that kind of like adults who didn't have kids could listen to and be like, not know that we were this lullaby band. And so that third record was like a lot of covers, and it was kind of like the slicker version of us doing that stuff. It's really got cool stuff on it. And then we just went away. Like, I was doing my job and we went away, and that record's called A Little Love, the covers record, the third record. And that was right when when we were recording, was right when Spotify started, in the States at least.
Yeah. And
a friend of mine had told me, just like, everything's going to be streaming. He wasn't even in the music business at the time, and he was just like, just say yes to all the streaming services. And I did while I was doing other stuff, and that's where we kind of blew up. Not right away, but sort of 5 years in, like, our streaming numbers just started going up. And I was like looking at stuff while I was doing this other job going, wow, that's cool. What's going on? But we had enough momentum and the music, I guess, was good enough through, physical sales, which really hadn't been that much, like maybe a couple thousand records, which is something, but it wasn't like iTunes downloads was right, pre-streaming, it was just downloads, right? We had enough going on that something happened, and after, a few years of streaming being around, the numbers just started going up. Now we're at something like 300 million streams.
Oh,
it's
wow.
over 300 million streams. It's crazy. Like, I just started doing TikTok for Renee and Jeremy because I was doing it for my solo stuff, and it seems to be doing really well there. We'll just say that. Like, it seems to be doing a thing on TikTok.
Well, the latest album, Shout, you guys had in 23. I love the covers concept. I'm a big covers fan. I like when bands, take songs and make them their own. And this is, what I like the best about cover songs is this style of what you're doing with Renee and Jeremy, where you take the song and you change it up to where it's, you make it sound like you wrote it, or their songs are recognizable enough. I know that you didn't, but it's, the harmonies that you guys are doing, it's pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. The last two records are like definitely, the ones we made. We made A Whole Lotta Love during the pandemic, and then Shout, just sort of at the end of it. We're definitely like, okay, this is we're going to be conscious about making these records for two audiences. Like, we want to go super into our indie folk aesthetic and make them feel really cool that way, and then choose covers that also, like, our fans who have little kids, like, could feel cool playing for their kids. So there's some funny songs in there. Yeah. Like Whole Lotta Love, the Led Zeppelin song, the sort of recoding of this incredibly sexual song as a lullaby is pretty funny, and so I appreciate, that's part of the trick, the game that we're doing, obviously, is how do we take these songs and recontextualize them and give them, like, new meaning. Like, the song that's doing really well on TikTok is Kids, MGMT.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is like, it's great in its original form. It's this kind of, psychedelic disco song, but it's got this incredibly tender lyric, and which you don't think about necessarily at all, if you're just listening to their version, because it's about the synth hook as much as anything else, right? It's like do 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 do, or I think that's not even in our version. Like we don't even do that at all, it's great. I mean, it's a freaking like totally stone cold hook, but that's the fun we have with it. And we started doing there's one original on Whole Lotta Love, and then there's a couple more on Shout, where it's like, okay, let's start to bring in our own tunes. And the next record is going to be, definitely the balance will be more on originals. We'll still have to do some covers, but we're just really sort of doing what we really want to do with it, because it's already... the records for the lullaby people are already there, right? And it's like the records for the people who love covers are there. Like, and there'll be we'll just do some more covers because we dig doing it, but we want to, the first record is all us writing songs for the most part. It's just they're songs for families. So it's like, we can write songs, so let's write some. So we'll see. Like, I really like the seeds that we have. It's gonna be fun to see how they evolve.
Yeah, we're excited for you.
Yeah, definitely. My last question with your solo work is, now that you kind of got found the love again for doing your solo music, what is next? Are you thinking about an EP or an album or a tour of any kind?
Yeah. So thank you for asking. There's a few songs lined. Yes, there's going to be a full length album. I don't know who's going to put that out, if it's going to be self-released or not. Like, I'm sure I'll talk to Loose Groove. That might be a possibility. But I'm going to spend basically 2025. I already have some others coming out this November, and then there's a song called Rocket, which is pretty much, we just mixed it. So that's pretty much ready to go, and that'll come out in like late January, February. There's a couple other songs that are pretty much done, so it's just going to be singles, and we'll just keep recording and releasing, and by the time we get to this time next year, there'll be a full record. That's yeah. And my hope, what I want to do with that, and for the next one, Jeremy, to be honest, but like, I want that full record to have a physical life too, so that would be something to find a label partner to do. Like, we'll finish the record and we could just put it out. We'll put it out as digital singles, and along the way the idea is to like figure out somebody to partner with us to put it out as a digital, some vinyl, and do something proper.
That would
some
be
art.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
All right, so we got one last question for you. This is kind of like a non-music question. You graduated from Princeton with a Bachelor's of Arts and focus on English. Take us back to your undergraduate studies and your experiences at Princeton. Talk a little bit more about it.
Oh my gosh, that is such a... That's great. I never get asked about that, so that's really cool. Went to Princeton to be an architecture major. I thought I was going to be an architect. I realized that was going to be a lot of work, and I was I'm such a friggin' artiste, man. I mean, like, I can't help it. But, like, aesthetically, I was not aligned with their architecture department. That sounds so pretentious, but I just wasn't. Like, I was they were into this postmodern architecture style. I was like, I don't know. I have this other thing that I'm into. I was like, I'm not going to sit here and like work all night to just be at odds with the department. And I'm really into this band. I'm starting to get really into this band that I'm in, even though I barely have started playing bass. And so I was in this band called Noise Petals, like flower petals. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, fuck it. I'm going to be an English major. This sophomore year is where you declare majors. And I was like, fuck it. I'm going to be an English major and rock. And that's what I did, basically. I was like, and that band, it was like one of the best times I ever had playing music. We played, they don't have frats, and they have frats now probably, but like there's these things called eating clubs at Princeton. Princeton is like such a cult, weird ass place. I mean, I love the people I met there. It's just so, there's like this cult of exceptionalism. Like, it's one of those places where it's like you go to reunions, like, we're the greatest class, or the greatest school, and the greatest. It's very those vibes. And you're like, our colors are orange and black. Like, how can you even take yourself seriously? But they have these things called eating clubs. And these eating clubs were like, instead of, you didn't live there, but you would, as a junior and senior, you would eat your meals there, and then they'd have parties. And so, like, we got to play, our band got paid to play, and we would just go and get, like, fucked up and play covers and play our originals, and everybody would be psyched. It was awesome. It was completely not the way the music business is in the real world. And we made a little EP, and it's basically where I got bit by the music bug. I mean, people don't go to Ivy League schools traditionally to become artists, though there's a lot of us. There's a lot more of us. I think, like, Galaxy 500 and Luna, those guys, I can't believe I'm forgetting Homeboy's name. We're friends on Instagram, but, like, they're Harvard people, I think. There's some strange Ivy Leaguers in rock and roll, but Princeton is not a lot of us, but I'm one of them.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
Not really. I mean, that's all of it. And, like, thank you guys so much.
Well, this is how things are going to work out. Jeff is the editing ninja, so he's going to clean up all of our verbal boogers tonight.
Great.
And then
good luck, Jeff.
he'll get it all cleaned up, and then
amazing.
Yeah, he does a great job. It's amazing the guy is an accountant by day. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, like I said, it'll be out within probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks, and then I'll send it to you, and please share it wherever you possibly can on your socials, and we'll do the same.
Yeah. I will absolutely. I'm really good about that, and now I have TikTok too.
Yeah. Even better. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, it was great talking to you guys, and I hope it works for your purposes. I look forward to hearing it, spreading the word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll be in touch.
Awesome. All right. Take care, you guys.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both their eyes. They roll the dice. Take your chances.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The Sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.